If you're a high achiever who's done the hard work on sobriety, but still feel trapped in mental loops that surface fixes never quite touch, you're not alone. Today, you'll discover why the performance mask and willpower alone keep those cycles alive, and how shifting from managing behaviors to rebuilding your identity on a foundation of honest vulnerability creates the lasting freedom and authentic confidence that discipline can't deliver on its own. You'll leave with one practical step you can use immediately to start unmasking and moving forward. I chose Wesley for this conversation because he lived exactly this: a pastor's kid who appeared to have it all together while hiding teen addiction, codependency, shame, and the fear of truly being known. Please welcome Wesley Farnsworth.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so good to be with you today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thanks, Wesley. So many high-performing men in recovery are masters at discipline, control, and showing up steady on the outside. Yet they often stay trapped in shame loops or hidden patterns. From your own story as a pastor's kid who hid addiction and shame for years while performing, what surprised you most about the performance mask actually sustaining those internal cycles, and why simply doubling down on willpower can backfire instead of creating lasting freedom?
Yeah, I think that comes down to just our overall desire to have control, right? We are raised at a young age to make sure that when we go to our friend's house or we go out in public that we are acting a certain way, we are doing certain things so that we reflect positively on our parents. And it's not always necessarily done as a way to make us wear masks per se, but it is done as a way to kind of keep us in line a little bit, so to speak. I think that kind of naturally carries over into our adult life, right? As we get older, we're taught that, hey, we want to control how other people see us. And so we're taught to wear these masks. We're taught to not share about what's going on at home because we don't share family business outside of the house, right? We're taught to keep things kind of suppressed and only talk about them with certain people. We're taught at a young age. We're taught, when we go out in public, when we see somebody, we're taught to say, hey, how are you doing? Right? We're taught to ask that question. It's just a common occurrence. Doesn't matter where you go, somebody's going to ask you, how you doing? But they don't want the answer. They just want you to say, I'm good, because that's how we're taught to respond. And then everybody's happy. Oh, he was so polite. He asked me how I'm doing. And so we're just taught to do this type of stuff from a very young age. And what I have found is that as you get older, it's harder to take off that mask. It's harder for us to admit that, hey, you know what? I'm not okay. Hey, you know what? I have things going on internally, but I've been keeping this stuff bottled up for so long. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know what to do with these feelings that I'm having because I've never really been taught per se how to do this, especially if you're a guy. Because a guy is taught to be the stoic person. They're taught to be the person that is strong, that supports everybody, that everybody else leans on, while the women are taught to feel their emotions and to do these types of things. It's just kind of a natural gender role, I guess you could say, in some ways. I know from my own experience growing up, you asked kind of a little bit about my upbringing, and you mentioned that, I grew up as a pastor's kid, right? And with that comes kind of some unwritten rules. I was never told that I had to act a specific way to do certain things. My parents weren't like that. That doesn't change, some of the kind of unwritten tendencies, rules that I kind of felt from outside the home, right? The people that were, they see you in church and like, oh, you should be acting this way. There's just kind of the way when people look at you, you know what they're expecting, without them saying anything. I think you can relate to that, and so can your listeners. And so I kind of had those feelings kind of growing up. I kept things bottled up. And so when in my teen years, I did discover an addiction. I did discover pornography. I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. I didn't, because at first it was just an interest. It was just a curiosity. So it wasn't an addiction right to start off. But because I really didn't know who to talk to about this new curiosity, this new interest, I wasn't able to do what I needed to do with it to kind of stop it from becoming an addiction early on.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason, is just because of how we're kind of naturally taught from a young age. I even do that with my own kids, right? I even teach my own kids, hey, we're in a restaurant, this is how we act. When we're in the store, this is how we act. When we see people, what do we say? It's just kind of, it's a natural thing.
Sure. At the same time, I think that, and maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, is that what we fail to do is often provide the guidance of when it's okay to actually discuss those challenging things. We are focused on the external, but we don't often teach the kids how they're allowed to act when we're in the house. Like, it's okay. Our business is our business. You can talk to me when we're at home.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is important to make sure that your kids know that they can come to you and talk to you. I know this isn't a childhood podcast,
No.
but when you think about it, it all ties together because what we're taught as a child carries over into our adult life, and so in a lot of ways, it all ties together. And so it's just important to make sure that if you are in the life of a child, that they understand that they can talk to you about something. And then now as an adult, right? Just because you're not at home with your mom and dad doesn't mean you don't have people that you can't talk to. If your mom and dad are still living, I guarantee you could call them and say, "Hey, mom, dad, this is what can I talk to you?" And they probably are going to say yes. I don't know a mom and dad that probably would say no and hang up on you. And if mom and dad aren't around anymore, first of all, I'm sorry. I don't have my dad anymore, so I understand that feeling. But there's other people out there in your life that can do that. Community is so important in your life. So if you don't have a community around you that you can talk openly and honest with, then that might be your first step, is to find community members that you can be open and honest with without feeling judged. And if you can't find that, then find a counselor. There's counselors and therapists out there that you can talk to. The important thing is that you find somebody that you can talk to about the things that you're going through in life so that you're not carrying them alone.
So, Wesley, tell me, why simply on this willpower issue do you think that it backfires when you're trying to work on yourself? Because I see guys out there who sometimes just say, I'm going to white knuckle my way through this and it'll be okay. Why doesn't that work?
Yeah, I can say this doesn't work because that was me for the longest time, right? My addiction was 20 years in the making, or 20 years long. And I tried so many times to cancel or to quit it on my own, cancel the addiction on my own, because I thought I could do it. I don't need to involve anybody else. I got myself into this mess. I can get myself out of it. That's something a lot of people say. The problem is that they're trying to do multiple roles at the same time. When you're trying to quit something, number one, the first step is admitting that you have something that you need to quit. And then you have to tell somebody else about this thing, because when you're not willing to tell somebody about the issues that you're facing, then that issue still has a hold on you. That issue still has power over you, because when you don't talk about it, you're still allowing it to stay in the darkness and the shadows. And it's not until that you begin to talk about it, even with just one person, that it starts to come into the light and it starts to lose its power over you. It starts to lose its grip on you. The enemy, the devil, begins to lose his foothold in that area. That's one of the big things, is talk about it with somebody else. For me, it took me talking about it with somebody else and truly saying, okay, God, you know what? I've tried to do this on my own, and I have failed time and time again. I don't know what else I need to do. Like, I'm just giving this over to you. And when I did that, and I took that first step of talking to somebody else about it, that's when I stopped trying to be the one in control. And we talked about this at the opening of the podcast. Control, that's our tendency. When you're trying to do something on your own, what you're doing is saying, I want complete, utter control over my life. So you're refusing to bring in the help that you need. Because if you're to the point that you have an addiction, you're to the point that you need somebody else in your life to keep accountability. You need community. Trying to do it on your own isn't going to achieve that. And so that's why we tend to keep self-isolated. We tend to not go out to group functions. We do everything we can to limit our exposure. We don't want people to see the true us. We don't want people to see the addiction, the shame, the pain that we're experiencing. We kind of distance ourselves, so to speak. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did answer my question. And I want to go a little bit deeper here to understand. I mean, faith obviously is something that you've been around your whole life. And so this is a very interesting thing for me. Is there a point where you felt like you had stepped away from faith at all? Or was this something that was always with you, but deepened as you found yourself pushing towards sobriety?
Yeah, my faith has always been with me. I've never walked away from my faith. But it has definitely challenged my faith, because again, I wanted control. And so I would still go to church every Sunday. I would still volunteer on Sundays. I would still do everything that on the outside made it look like I had it all together, right? Nobody knew that what I was dealing with on the inside. So my faith was always there. I have always believed, in Christ. I've always had my faith. I've always had that relationship, but it wasn't until I was able to finally admit that I couldn't do it on my own and fully surrender everything to God that my faith really started to deepen to get me to where I am now.
What was the first step in that beyond admitting that you had this challenge? Because you mentioned a few minutes ago that was 20 years, and that's a long time to live with that struggle within while walking in the faith. What overtook it? How were you able to finally lean into the fix?
Yeah, a lot of it was just admitting that I didn't have the power to do it on my own. I had finally reached that breaking point where I'm like, you know what? I have tried to do this so many times on my own and I have failed. And my church that I was attending at the time started this ministry called Celebrate Recovery. And they kind of explained it. And at first, when they explained this group, I was like, oh, that's cool. We're starting a recovery meeting, but that's not for me, right? I don't have anything to do with drugs or alcohol. When people think recovery, that's what they think of. But what's cool about this recovery meeting, this Celebrate Recovery, is that it's for anyone with any kind of a hurt, habit, hang up, any kind of addiction. So it could be that you hate the color blue. It could be that you've lost a parent. It could be that you like to pick your nose. It could be drugs. It could be alcohol. Literally, it could be anything. If you're alive and breathing, it's for you, because we have people that come for everything. And as they were kind of explaining this from the stage, I kind of was like, oh, maybe I should check it out. After I kind of went back and forth for a couple of months, making myself decide to finally go. When I finally took that first action step and took that first step forward, that is when the change began to break, because I had to be willing to take that first step and admit that I couldn't do it on my own.
That's awesome. That's really incredible. So in your book, The Blueprint of Becoming, you offer a practical roadmap which blends raw testimony, biblical wisdom, and the tools for those feeling stuck between who they are and who they're called to be. For listeners who have spent years defined by their addiction, their past mistakes, or the pressure to perform, how does this identify first becoming process help them move beyond simply trying to avoid old behaviors into one that's actively creating change?
Yeah, in my book, I use the analogy of a ship sailing the waters. When you think of a ship sailing waters, they use stars to navigate by. I was actually in a Celebrate Recovery meeting when this analogy got kind of brought to my mind. And he said, Wes, when you're going through life, what is your North Star? Is it me or is it something else? And he said, when I am your North Star, then you're going to be walking in your purpose, in the blueprint that I have for your life, because you're going to be following my will. But when you allow something else to take over that position and you get off course, when you allow that job or that addiction or that relationship or that sport or that hobby or whatever it is, when you allow that other thing to become the North Star, the star that you're guiding your ship by, your life by, you're going to be off course and you're no longer going to be in alignment with the blueprint that I have for your life. So in the book, like you said, I share my personal testimony about how I was brought up, things that I faced, the way that I saw God show up in my life, how I got into recovery, my time in the military, all that fun stuff I talk about in the first couple of chapters. And then we look at some biblical characters that if you and I heard this story today and we took out their name and inserted it with John Doe, we would say this person's not qualified to lead in the church. This person's not qualified to do this. This person killed somebody. I don't want them leading me. But God said, I don't care what you did. I can still use you and I will use you if you say yes. And so we look at some of those, at 3 different characters specifically that God said, I don't care what you did. You can still walk in your blueprint. And so we look at some of those. And then, like you said, and throughout the book, but there is one chapter specifically dedicated to tools that you can use. Throughout the book, I kind of give you some journal prompts and some questions that you can ask yourself to kind of reflect on your life and what you're going through now and identify what those areas might be that have taken over the North Star position, and then how to begin to make those changes to redirect your course, so to speak, to make sure that you're walking in alignment.
That's really cool. And do you use some sort of accountability within the processes that you line out? How do they measure their progress, or do you have anything like that?
A lot of it is
Hmm.
it's self-driven, but as I've said, life and especially addiction recovery is not meant to be done alone. So I highly encourage people to use community to go through this book, right? Find yourself somebody that you can talk to as you're going through to help keep you accountable. To the point that I actually developed a 10-week study guide for this book and I include both a leader's guide and the participant's guide. And I offer that completely free of charge on my website. And you can go and actually download this and then go through the book as a group. So now you have a built-in community there because you're going through it together. And you can share with each other each week the things that kind of were brought to your mind and be able to do that. Because I often use the analogy of a gym when I talk about the importance of community, right? When you think about the beginning of the year and you have people that go to the gym, those that try and go to the gym by themselves and set this new routine often stop within a month or so because of one reason or another. But those that join the gym with a friend or a coworker or somebody like that, and they both agree to meet at the gym every day or every other day or whatever schedule it is that you set at a set time, you're more likely to find success because now you have community. You have that group, you have that person that's going to be there to keep you accountable and you them. And so neither one of you want to be the one to say, hey, I can't make it today because now you're disappointing the other person or you're afraid of disappointing the other person. And so that same analogy carries over into other areas of your life. When you have somebody that can help keep you accountable and check in on you and ask you questions and you them in return, you're far more likely to have success.
It's interesting because a lot of the practical nature of your blueprint in a lot of ways lines up to my listeners who are using the sober method. And one of the ways that I see the alignment really strongly is in the observation step, which is observe and then mapping those behavior changes. So the OB steps of sober. How can someone use the elements of your framework to help supplement the work that they're doing on a daily basis?
Yeah, a lot of it is just the daily observation of your own life. You have to take inventory, if you will, of your life every day and like realize what areas did I fall short today? Right? What areas do I need to work on to improve myself? And when you can do that, then you can start to identify trends earlier and stop things before they start to become a problem. I took an extra 15 minutes today before I sat down and read the Bible. I took an extra 15 minutes today before I called my sponsor or my accountability partner or my friend or whatever and checked in. Or I didn't do this today and I haven't done this for 3 weeks. Right. And as you kind of do those inventories, those daily routine inventories, you can begin to identify patterns emerging and you'll be like, oh, I need to set and hold myself accountable, right? Keep myself from doing this. And so that's kind of one of the big areas that I'm just like, you kind of have to force yourself to do this regularly.
Yeah, journaling is so powerful and writing that stuff down. And I think it's one of the probably biggest challenges I see everyone face is keeping themselves accountable just to write the stuff down
Yeah.
and even to record it. And sometimes that bridge, I really encourage handwriting things because it's got that connection to your brain. It really does work. But even getting daily notes can sometimes be a challenge. Do you have any advice to people who are struggling just to take that first step, getting them in the routine of doing it?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I tell people, cause I'm this way, like I'm terrible at journaling But if you've never journaled before, one of the barriers I find people is, I don't know what to write. And so if you're like that and you're listening, you're like, I want to start journaling. I know I should start journaling. Everyone tells me I should start journaling, but what do I write? I tell people, you know what, sit down, put your pen on the paper and just start, even if it's just scribbling, just draw circles, line after line after line. And then if something comes to mind, write it down. It doesn't matter what it is. If you think the color blue, write the color blue. And eventually, the important thing is that you don't edit yourself. Write whatever you think. If you think mom got mad at me yesterday, then write mom got mad at me yesterday. If you think I wore the wrong pants yesterday, write I wore the wrong pants yesterday. Like whatever it is, write it down. And then at the end of whatever time limit, set yourself a 10-minute timer or a 5-minute timer or whatever. And then at the end, kind of look and see what it was that you actually wrote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the next day, do the same thing. And the next day, do the same thing. And eventually it's going to become easier for those thoughts to start coming to mind. And after a while, you may be able to look back and start seeing trends. Why do I always write about pants? Why do I always write about colors? Why do I always write about mom? Right. And you'll start to see some trends appearing. Now, if you're like me and you absolutely hate writing, right? My hands cramp up. I haven't written a lot since I was in grade school and you just hate writing. For me, I have an app on my phone that I downloaded and I just allow myself to do voice recording memos and I keep them on a folder, pin locked or whatever on my phone, or it goes to my cloud in a secure folder someplace and just say, okay, you know what? I'm driving down the road and this thought just came to my mind. So you hit the voice memo note on your phone and you just voice whatever it is and you keep a running journal that way, right? A journal does not have to be this really long 15-page essay about what happened that day. It can be just a short 2 to 3 line note about whatever it was that just happened to you. But the important thing is to make note of things that happen to you that are important or could play a role in your future or whatever it is, because then you have those types of things to look back on.
Yeah, that's very powerful. I really like what you said about doodling just to get yourself started. That's a really good bit of advice. So everyone listening, before we close, here is one simple step you can use right away based on what Wesley has shared today. When you notice one of those familiar mental loops or feel the weight of a mask you're still wearing, I want you to pause for 5 minutes, grab a piece of paper, and do a quick blueprint check. In the center, I want you to write who I am becoming. And on one branch, name the hindrance, the pattern, or performance mask that you're carrying. And on the other, I want you to write one faithful step or surrender that is going to align with the person God is calling you to be. See what emerges when you can actually see it laid out on a sheet of paper. Do this at least once today. Notice what shifts and see if you can build on it tomorrow. And this is how we start turning hidden cycles and performance pressure into clear, confident action that supports lasting sobriety and authentic confidence. Wesley, we have a tradition on this podcast where each guest answers a question left by my last guest. John Diggs left you this question. What was the greatest feeling that you had helping someone else?
Yeah, man, I love that question. And a lot of this is going to come back to what I shared earlier about being willing to live unmasked. That's why my podcast, my own podcast, is called Unmasked, because it's so important to live that way. So important to go beyond the how you doing and being willing to talk openly and honestly about how you're feeling. And so one of the greatest joys I had was I was at this retreat and somebody said something. And I can't remember exactly what they said, but it led me to open up in the middle of this auditorium of probably 200 guys and talk for 30 seconds about my addiction. And I named it by name. Hey, I'd battled with pornography for 20 years. And the result of that 30 seconds was 2 guys came up to me out of the blue, did not know them from Adam. And they came up to me later and said, hey, I'm dealing with this right now. Can I talk to you? And what I found is that when we are willing to take off our masks and we are willing to expose the things that we've gone through or are going through, we then are giving permission to other people to do the exact same thing. And that is how the cycles and the masks of culture begin to break down. The barriers, that's the word I was looking for, begin to break down, and people can start to be open and honest with one another. And when you can do that, then the way society works, the way relationships are formed, the way relationships work, that's when they begin to change.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Wesley. To everyone listening, I want you to keep observing and journaling your own behaviors daily. I'm Massimo Rigotti. This is the Sober Method Podcast. Please follow, like, subscribe, and leave a review. And I ask that you share this episode with anyone who needs to hear it. Remember, your future is sober.